So, you're an MBA and you're eyeing that high-stakes world of investment banking. Forget what you've seen in the movies. We're going to pull back the curtain and give you the real, practical guide you need. Let's dive right in. You see it in the news all the time, right? Some tech giant buys a smaller competitor for billions of dollars. But have you ever stopped to wonder, how does that actually work? Who's in the middle of it all, making sure a deal that massive doesn't fall apart? Well, that's what we're here to talk about. First things first, let's get one thing straight. The bank we're talking about is not the one on the corner where you have your checking account. That's a commercial bank. They take deposits, they give out loans, they make money on interest. An investment bank? Totally different universe. They don't want your savings account. They're advising huge corporations on massive deals and raising capital. We're talking billions, and they get paid with huge fees and commission. Okay, to make this real, let's invent a company. We'll call them Innovate Inc. They're doing great, and they've decided they want to buy one of their main competitors. So what do? They call an investment bank, and this is where our story really begins. So what's the game plan? Well, the bank walks Innovate Inc. through a pretty structured 5-stage process. First, they prep all the marketing materials. Then, they get into early negotiations and sign something called a letter of intent. Basically, the "are we serious about this" document. After that comes the really intense part, due diligence. We'll get back to that. Then, it's the final contract negotiations and closing the deal. And it doesn't even end there. The last step is actually merging the two companies. The banker is like the quarterback for this entire massive undertaking. Now, of all those steps, I want to double-click on due diligence. This is, without a doubt, the most important phase. This is where the bankers become forensic accountants, legal experts, basically corporate detectives. They are digging through everything, looking for any hidden problems, any skeletons in the closet. Why? To make sure Innovate Inc. isn't about to make a billion-dollar mistake. This is where deals live or die. So, for all this work, how does the bank get paid? It's all about fees. But here's what's interesting. Look at the table. The bigger the deal, the smaller the percentage fee. Kind of counterintuitive, right? But it makes sense when you think about it. A lot of the work is the same, whether the deal is for $500 million or $5 billion. And hey, 1% of a $5 billion deal is still a $50 million payday. Not too shabby. All right, so Innovate Inc. has done its homework, they've negotiated a price, and they're ready to go. Just one tiny problem. They need to come up with the cash to actually buy the company. And that brings us to the second main job of an investment bank, raising capital. When it comes to raising money, the bank really has two main tools in its belt. The first is called equity capital markets, or ECM. Think of this as selling a slice of the company, issuing new shares of stock. The other option is debt capital markets, or DCM. This is more like taking a loan, issuing bonds that you have to pay back with interest. The bank's job is to advise Innovate Inc. on which path makes the most sense. Now, if they do decide to sell stock, they don't just guess a price. They use a really smart process called book building. It's basically a sophisticated auction. The bank goes out to all the big money managers and pension funds and says, hey, how much would you really be willing to pay for these shares? By collecting all those bids, they get a super accurate picture of the real market demand and can set the perfect price to get the most money for the company. Okay, so we've talked about what these banks do, but how are they actually structured? How do they handle all this sensitive, confidential information without it leaking and causing chaos? Let's take a look inside the machine. All right, first up, you've got the front office. These are the people you probably picture when you think of banking. They're the ones directly working with clients and making money for the firm. This includes the investment banking division, or IBD, those are deal architects, and the sales and trading folks, who are on the front lines of the market every single day. But the front office is just the tip of the iceberg. They literally couldn't function without the middle and back offices. These are the unsung heroes. The middle office is all about managing risk and making sure everyone is following the rules. The back office is the operational backbone. Think technology, HR, and all the logistics that make a global bank actually run. Now, there is one concept you absolutely have to understand. It's called the Chinese wall. No, it's not a real wall. It's a strict ethical barrier that separates the people who have confidential, private information, like our bankers advising Innovate Inc., from the people who operate on the public side of the business, like the traders. And here's why it is so critical. Think of it as a virtual cone of silence. The bankers working on the Innovate Inc. deal know that a huge market-moving event is about to happen. If that information leaked over to the bank's traders, they could use that insider info to make illegal profits. The Chinese wall is what stops that from happening. It protects market integrity, and it keeps bankers out of prison. It's that important. Okay, let's bring this all home. As an MBA, you need to know this stuff cold for your interviews. So let's wrap up with a quick playbook, the key takeaways, and the questions you should be ready to nail. So if you remember only 3 things from our time today, make it these. 1. Investment banks are advisors and deal architects for companies, not your neighborhood bank. 2. Their bread and butter is running these complex, multi-stage M&A and capital raising deals. And 3. The Chinese wall is the ethical foundation that makes the whole system possible. And finally, here's what you can expect when you're in the hot seat. I can almost guarantee you'll be asked some version of these 3 questions. They'll want you to walk them through an M&A deal. They'll ask you to explain the difference between equity and debt. And they will definitely ask you about the Chinese wall. If you can explain these concepts and, more importantly, why they matter, you are going to be in a fantastic position.